So hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we are diving into one of the most critical aspect of clinical research, that is biostatistics. Biostatistics isn't just about numbers. It's the science that ensures clinical trial results are reliable, valid and meaningful. From designing the study to determining the sample size to analyzing the data and to interpret the result, biostatistics play a central role in providing safety and efficacy data parameters to new drugs, vaccine and medical devices. In this particular video, we'll be focusing on understanding what is biostatistics and how it plays a role in clinical research, what are the key statistical concepts you must know, and how biostatistics impacts decision making during drug development. So if you're a student, researcher or a professional aiming to strengthen your foundation in clinical research, this video is for you. Please make sure that you subscribe to the channel to get such amazing knowledge about clinical research and life sciences. Without further ado, let's start. Now let us start from the basic and understand what exactly is biostatistics. So biostatistics is a field that combines statistical analysis with biomedical research, which is a critical component of clinical research. So in clinical research, whenever we quantify any kind of efficacy of the drug or safety data, that has to be backed by numbers, and that has to be backed by a logical mathematical analysis plan, which is biostatistics. Okay, so biostatistics along with its statistical analysis plays a very important role in clinical research, and this particular biostatistics also lays down the groundwork for designing, conducting and analyzing clinical trials. So biostatistics doesn't only come after we get all the data post completion of the clinical trial, but biostatistics is involved right from the conception of the clinical trial in the design phase, which goes on in the conducting phase of the clinical trial, and finally analyzing the clinical trial data. This particular field also helps the researchers to make informed decision using statistical principles and method. Okay, so depending upon what kind of clinical trial you are doing, what is your sample size, the researchers also make proper decision to conduct the clinical trial. And at the end of the day, what is the aim of biostatistics? So it helps you to select adequate sample size so that you can have valid conclusion of your clinical trial, because until and unless you have proper sample size of the subject, the efficacy of the drug, or how do you define whether your drug is efficacious or not, so that statistical analysis or the backing of biostatistics is very important. And finally, biostatistics also focuses on minimizing bias, followed by ensuring we have accounted for the variability in the study population, and that shows a clear picture whenever the study results are out there. Okay, so that is about biostatistics. Now let us understand how biostatistics plays important role in various aspects. So first we'll start with study design and planning. So how does biostatistics get involved during the study designing phase? So during the study designing phase, when clinical trial are conceptualized, biostatistics plays a very critical role, and this particular role we can clearly see in terms of randomized clinical trial or cohort control study or case control study. Okay, so as you might know, during the conduct of the clinical trial, it is not only that we conduct the entire trial on one single population, but we also have case control study, we also have cohort study. And how do you assign that, which number of participants or how many number of participants do we assign to one cohort and not the other cohort? So that particular selection is based on biostatistics and biostatistical models. Okay, and using biostatistics, it helps us to determine what are the primary and secondary endpoints of the clinical trial. Okay, so how do we define whether the clinical trial is completed? Depends upon the number of subjects that have completed in the study, and how do we define that statistical analysis? Okay, so that is where biostatistics play. And this particular biostatistics aid, which help us to determine the endpoints, also help us to clearly define our objective, which are very relevant as well as measurable in terms of numbers also. Okay, and also during the study designing phase, we have important components such as blinding and randomization. Okay, but how do we maintain the blinding and randomization framework which help us to reduce the bias and improve the validity of the finding? That also is taken care of by biostatistics. Okay, so if a clinical trial is designed in a statistically sound manner, it clearly guarantees us the ethical adherence, okay, reduction of bias, as well as having an efficient clinical trial to have a solid basis for reliable results. Okay, so that is how biostatistics is being integrated during the design as well as the planning phase. The next aspect where biostatistics play a significant role is sample size calculation. So as you know, whenever we conduct a clinical trial, it is very important to know what is the right sample size to produce results which are clinically valid. Okay, how do we define that? So that particular sample size, whenever we select for a clinical trial, that is backed by biostatistical analysis, and here the biostatistics ensure that the study includes enough participant to detect meaningful effect without being overburdened or unnecessary resources, because no matter how many resources you put into clinical trial, at the end of the day you have to draw valid conclusion, meaningful effects of that particular drug to determine whether your drug is efficacious or not, and that has to be backed by this particular biostatistical analysis. Okay, so using the sample size calculation, depending upon the what is the effective size, what is the variability measurement, followed by the statistical power of your sample size in clinical trial, that is going to drive your clinical trial, and that is going to help you a lot whenever you define or draw conclusions from your clinical trial data. Okay, so that is where the sample size conclusion calculations comes in, and that is where biostatistics fits in. Okay, again, whenever we design a particular clinical trial, or whenever we select a sample size, if we select the wrong size, that is the undersize study, it increases your risk of determining if your drug or medicine is efficacious or not. Okay, and while the size of the clinical trial, we can have a lot of resources, but at the end of the day we have to manage each and every resource, and in terms of biostatistics, managing the resources and reducing the waste or exposure of the participant to unnecessary risk is very important. That is why a statistically justified sample size or sample plan balances this particular restrictions or consideration. And when we have optimal sample size, it clearly tells you about the reliability and efficiency of the clinical trial that we are going to carry out. Okay, so that is about the sample size calculations. Again, biostatistics also helps us in data collection and management also. How do we do that? So whenever we have to have accurate and systematic data collection in a clinical trial, because these two are the most important function during the data collection phase. And what biostatistics play an important role is designing the data collection tools, the procedures, and ensuring these are standardized across all the sites in the clinical trial while reducing the errors. Okay, so biostatistics not only plays an important role in designing the clinical trial, but once the trial is designed, how are we going to collect that particular data? What is the accuracy of it? And how do we reduce the error? So that also biostatistics tells us. It also helps us to determine how to collect that particular data, what would be the baseline characteristic of that data, how do we measure the outcome. Okay, and this proper data management backed by the biostatistical plan will help us to take care of the statistical principle, data integrity, data validation, and data monitoring also. Okay, and this type of structured approach will definitely minimize the non-standard data, the discrepancy in the data, and any compromise in the final study outcomes. Okay, so if biostatistics is planning a particular trial, data collection methods, data management method, we can ensure that they have reduced the number of errors and reduce effort in clinical data management. So that is the impact of data management and collection using biostatistics. The next aspect would be the statistical analysis and interpretation. Okay, the core or heart of biostatistics. So whenever we talk about statistical analysis, we know that they are going to use the numbers that they have obtained during the entire clinical trial process and determine inferences from it. But a very, very sound statistical analysis plan is the heart of biostatistics. Okay, because that particular statistical analysis will transform your raw data into meaningful insight. This involves selection of proper statistical test based on the study design, the data type, and whenever we are using proper biostatistical technique like proper hypothesis testing or regression analysis, survival analysis, and other method, it clearly gives us a better edge to draw correct and meaningful conclusions. Okay, and using the statistical analysis plan, we can ensure that the results are correctly interpreted in the context of the data. We can ensure that we are clearly able to distinguish between statistically significant data and clinical relevance data. Okay, and the understanding of this particular analysis plan, this will create a nuanced understanding and this will aid in decision making while supporting the scientific conclusion. Okay, because at the start of the clinical trial, no matter what your hypothesis is, but if you have a sound statistical plan and that particular data is followed according to that, the trial is conducted according to that, it will clearly give you inferences or conclusion that will help you understand whether the clinical trial data or whether the decision making has been correct and whether it supports your scientific conclusion. Okay, so that is the power of statistical analysis and plan. Last but not the least, monitoring safety and efficacy. Okay, so biostatistics also play a very crucial role in monitoring safety and efficacy of the participant in clinical trial, because biostatistics also carry out interim analysis. Okay, so it is not necessary that biostatistics is only step in after the trial is completed. We also do interim analysis. In interim analysis, we assess the trend and detect the early signal of any adverse event or any inappropriate trend. And this statistical methodology also helps us to continue or analyze whether the trial is heading in the right direction, and do we need to modify this trial or the trial design in any way, or do we need to terminate this particular trial based upon the predefined criteria of the protocol. Okay, so you need not commit entire your resources of the clinical trial till the end of the clinical trial, but during the clinical trial also, in a robust methodology, we do interim analysis. And if you are working in clinical trial, you know the importance of interim analysis and how the data is cleaned, validated in the ongoing basis also. So that is also where biostatistics play a significant role in monitoring the trial in terms of safety and efficacy. Lastly, the dynamic oversight also helps us in determining patient safety while maintaining the study integrity. Because if we see early signals of adverse event or a repeated pattern, or if we are able to draw conclusion from biostatistical analysis, then we can also save patient from any kind of injuries, harm, or any kind of untoward event also. So that is also where biostatistics during interim analysis will help us. And if we talk about post-marketing surveillance, there also the biostatistics help you in determining the long-term safety and effectiveness of your particular drug. So not only during clinical trial, after the clinical trial is completed, after the drug is being marketed, there also we can use this biostatistical model and monitor the long-term safety of the drug and effectiveness in the general population. So thank you for watching this video till the end. Please make sure that you subscribe to the channel to get some amazing updates. Thank you.